Welcome to the Military Historian Podcast. I'm Lloyd Shellenberger. I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, I'm Lloyd Shellenberger from the Military Historians Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to some soldiers and the wife of a soldier, Melissa, who are subjects of the book called Left Behind Letters from Baghdad. This is an intriguing story that I think everybody should actually read and learn about. And today we're going to spend some time talking to them, and I'm going to introduce them. We have Shayne Beckert and Melissa Beckert. Shayne, would you say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
There you go. This is Shayne Beckert, and this is Melissa. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay, so what I'm going to go through today is just your time over there and your time, what you noticed when he left and when he came back. The things that you saw that were different. Because I think every soldier who's ever spent time in a war zone, the family knows he's different or she's different when they get back. There's nothing the same that you can really relate to anymore. So it's tough. A lot of marriages don't last after they come back from the war zone. And I'm not saying that's the case here, but I'm saying to you that it is a factor. So Shayne, you were with the 141st Engineer Battalion out of what city?
It was out of Jamestown, North Dakota.
Okay.
Yep.
And you did what? What was your job?
I was a platoon sergeant in Jamestown there when we left, and my job was to take them soldiers to a battle and bring them all home.
But you had a very specific job, which most people probably would never do. Tell me about that job.
Well, the job that we were really supposed to do was like engineering and help pour concrete and build structure. And we had a MOS, and our MOS required us to be able to work with explosives. We understood them very well. We were, our missions were to blow up railroad tracks and structure if needed, and we would calculate all that stuff. So combat engineer was what I was when we left.
Right, but one of the things you did do, you disarmed bombs. Yes, that's first of all, the size of the balls it takes to do that, I can't even imagine. Tell us about that.
I was very fortunate that I had 20 years of experience in electrical. I never had a license. I managed several crews in my civilian life, journeymen, and inspected all their work, so I understood a lot about electrical. That came into play really well over there, that I could actually look at stuff, analyze it, figure it out. We could see if it was disabled enough where we could approach it. It helped. It also helped when we got in there to Camp Spiker, and we were in our barracks. We needed a lot of electrical work to get things running, so we had assets to sleep and have light. And so, yeah, we were, I guess my expertise was going to be utilized very well over there, and our mission now was to disable bombs and route clearance and combat patrol.
MSR Tampa, correct?
MSR Tampa.
And that went from Samara, upper Samara area to where?
North to Beijing, 86 kilometers is about what I believe it was. I'm not 100% sure on that. Grant would probably know more about that, but it was 86 kilometers, and our mission was to stay within 300 meters of the MSR, which we didn't do very often. That was the dangerous place to be, was along the MSR, so if we took a break, we were outside of that, sometimes several miles off the MSR.
Did you know what he did?
No, not until later.
Not until later.
No, the whole time they spent in Colorado was nothing what they did when they arrived to Iraq.
Yeah, because he got assigned to Operation Trailblazer.
Yeah.
After he got there. Did you know you were going to be assigned to it, Shayne?
At first, no. We weren't, I don't believe we were told what we were going to do. Grant might have had more information. He was our captain. Mm-hmm. But for us, we were going to help build the base and help the other soldiers get into stuff that we would create a better living conditions for them, and that changed real fast.
Right.
We didn't do any of that, not our company.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. The big thing that I took away from this as far as leadership was that you had a couple of very qualified people there and a lot of butter bars. Is that true? That really weren't as experienced as you.
Well, I always look at it like this, and when you have butter bars, it's a fresh guy that just can come out of college and go up to a sergeant first class or any high-ranking sergeant and give them an order. They have to follow the orders, and they have to listen to a guy who has had no field experience whatsoever. That's why it was so important to me, and I was so happy that I had Grant, Captain Wilz at the time. I had a captain. It was so comforting knowing that.
You lost people on the way over there, and I know one of your best friends, Lance Corporal Lance Koenig, right? Koenig, and he was killed by a roadside bomb. Ironically, the nurse that attended to him on the roadside was April, the same woman who eventually attended to Fatima and her children. Tell me about the day you found out about his death.
I was back in Cantonment, sitting in my barracks there, and it was in a different platoon that I was in, and it was a specialist Koenig, and I think Grant had just come, or I can't even remember. It was such a blur of time, and I just couldn't fathom what had happened. The guy was a guy who used to stay at my house every time we had drill. Best friends to me and my family, and I took it really hard. It was the most terrible thing. And then I've got the details later exactly how he died, and it was absolutely one of the most gruesome deaths you could ever have. An IED had a booby trap underneath it, and he had literally blown his throat and face apart. And
There was nothing they could do to help him on the spot.
no, there's our medic, April at the time was still holding to this day that she thought she could do something to help him, and
Could she have?
there is absolutely no way.
No.
His jugular veins were sticking out of his neck, and his face was half blown off on a booby trap.
Yeah, so she did everything she could.
Yeah.
Philip Brown was another soldier. They called him DJ. And from all reports, great kid. Everybody loved him. Tell me about that.
Well, he was one of the most soft-spoken soldiers I had. He did exactly what you asked him to do. He was a Christian, virgin. One of the nicest guys that I could ever. I don't ever remember hearing him even swear. He's just the picture perfect soldier, and he just a very tall soldier, strong, and in my platoon. And I was there that day when he got hurt. He died the next day, but
He died on May 8th, am I correct?
that is correct.
2004. He died from wounds because from what I had spoken to Grant and read the reports, he literally almost had his legs amputated as a result of the blast, correct?
That is correct. Would you like me to tell you what I saw?
No, I think we'll leave that alone, but I do know there was one thing he said to you. According to the reports, I don't know if this is accurate, did he say to you, "They really got me, Sarge"?
He did. He was, Grant was working on tourniquets on his legs, what was left of his legs, and he was laying on his back, and as I ran up there, and I looked down at him, and he said that to me, that I think they got me, Sergeant Beckert, and I said to him, no, they didn't, Phil. I go, just keep your eyes closed, and I believe I saw some blood come out of his mouth and run down his cheek. He had some internal bleeding going on too. It wasn't just his legs.
This was not really uncommon. This was actually a very common theme, death. And it really was part of the Iraqi war, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. I can't, until you've experienced war and death and smell, and the visual that you'd see, it kind of makes you inhuman. We didn't have the slightest clue what we were about to go into.
No, and I got that when you originally arrived in Kuwait, and then when you went forward to your base, you weren't exactly treated as full-on adults. It almost like you were conscripts headed to something that. Am I right about this? I guess the best way of putting this, there wasn't as much respect and treatment of you as there should have been, but it was part of the protocol that there was no way around what had to be done, correct?
That's correct. You know, I think there was a stereotype immediately, Lloyd, that we were just National Guard soldiers. You know, I got that feeling from the time I was there serving underneath regular infantry and Marines, that at first, and even who we did eventually fight under, the Big Red One, that we're just National Guard soldiers. And when we got in there, what they didn't realize at the time is we were a bunch of educated soldiers. We had a lot of talent in many different aspects, plumbers, electrical, everything. We didn't have the infrastructure. We had to, we made it. We made our living quarters and made our life as comfortable as we could. It was absolutely amazing what we did and what Captain Wilz did. Just to see the living conditions of 6 inches of sheep shit on the floor and one light bulb hanging there, to what he did to the place with finding assets and building us a luxury apartment tree for that matter, for living in those conditions, and we did it all by ourselves.
When you got to cook in the warehouse that night and there was snow, you recognized right away that there was medical supplies that you knew you were eventually going to need. You had a suspicion, am I correct, where this was headed, and everything in every medical supply was golden to you, correct?
Medical supply, any type of
Stretchers.
Yeah, any type of equipment we could get our fingers on, switches, outlets. I was trying to figure out how to even get some tools, some basic tools. Otherwise, it was going to be these old teeth stripping wire. We just went on recon. We kind of organized the little thing, and we got and did what we needed to do.
You filled up a bunch of duffel bags.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk to you about any of this?
No, when he was in Iraq, there was no communication.
Yeah, talk to me about that. What was that? And what consisted of that one phone call that year? That was the only thing you really had, correct?
So all of us wives, they had set times. After a few months of the guys being gone, they set times at the armory where we could come and video between us. And our son was
8 months.
6 months old
Right.
at that time, maybe. When he left, our son was 2 months old, in the hospital with RSV. I'm trying to get down to the armory in Jamestown to say goodbye. I had my sister come to watch Connor in the hospital as I came down to. I actually don't even remember that because it was just so much going on. I remember waving at him as they were leaving on the bus and going back to the hospital. But anyways, after he left, I don't even know how long. It was months before we talked.
Did you sense any changes already starting by that particular time that you talked to him the next time? You already begin to see something.
It was
different?
more about our son. We didn't really talk
So
about
you
what
really
he did,
concentrated on
or
family, correct?
yeah, it was more.
I didn't really want her to know what we were doing.
I didn't ask questions.
It probably was a wise thing. I mean, she had to run the house. She had a lot of stuff on her back to take care of.
We had a brand new salon that opened 2 days after he left.
Wow. In March, you met an Iraqi informant by the name of Majid. You met him on the side of the road. You duct taped up his axle, and you got him moving and got him back to his house. The family fed you. You found out that he really wanted to help the Americans. He really cared about helping you guys. He ended up saving a lot of lives. Tell me about Majid.
One of the most kindest men. You know, tall, very strong, very intelligent man. I could tell just in his demeanor, the way he moved around and how he talked to us and how he was comfortable. I liked him immediately, but at first, you know, when we did find him alongside the road, we had given him the duct tape to fix his tire, and he figured out how to fix a tire with a roll of duct tape. And then we found an AK-47 in his vehicle. After we shook him down a little bit, had some information he provided to us, we could call in to an operating base and verify his information, and it was legitimate. And we gave him his AK-47 back and made sure that he got off down the road. And then after that, after helping his wife out, because she was really sick, she had a high fever, we gave her some simple Tylenol, which they never had that kind of drugs, and that took her fever away. The man was our best friend from those days forward.
And you would sit around and sometimes go through maps and other information, intel, and decide what you were going to pass on to command, correct?
That is correct. Sound tables, intel as best we could understand each other through our interpreter, telling us places where to really watch out for, where there was going to be some stuff alongside the road, and that information really was important to us, because if we couldn't get to that, we were already relaying forward to other parts of other platoons that were doing the same thing we were, and they were closer to it before some of the coalition forces would drive by that area, whether it was transportation or logistics convoys, anybody for that matter, even civilians. We wanted to make sure we took care of that as quickly as possible and not let it sit.
Well, for the most part, his information was good, it was accurate, and he also helped you find bomb-making places and other things. And tell me how he would get this information.
Well, he was driving around, listening to people talk, sitting in cafes, you know, subtly gathering a lot of intelligence. And now he used to be a securities officer for Saddam Hussein, and so he was very, very cunning on how he did stuff. And he was able to provide us, you know, bomb-making places where they're fabricating these IEDs, and then he would be visiting with indirectly some of the farmers that were in the local area where a lot of the IEDs, they had some information. He just put it all together, and then when we come, he would give us the information. And the unfortunate thing is there was a time too where we had an interpreter that wasn't interpreting the right things to us, so it was really hard to communicate a lot of that stuff when you have somebody that's not a good interpreter. It was quite a challenge, just a language barrier, and then now you have an interpreter that is not saying what
You're saying. Yes.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah.
So when you were with him, he asked you to do something very specific. And this was telling in where he saw this was going to go. What did he ask you to do?
You know, I think he had a deep down gut feeling. I could see a little sadness in his eyes, because I think he knew that his days were numbered. There was just too much exposure of him with American forces, whether it was alongside the highway, us going to his house. People saw that. He had asked me, you know, would you take care of my family if something ever happens to me, it was that we could get them back to the America,
What'd
to
you
safety.
say?
And we told him yes, we would do that. You know, that you'd say with a grain of salt, because if everybody brought everybody, or could bring everybody back to the United States, that's a huge, huge logistical feat, especially with the red tape and the restrictions of immigrants coming back into the United States at that time was really strong, very tight. And this would have never happened if it wouldn't have been for Captain Wilz. He had the connections, and he started making them. And his family was very high-ranking, very political. They started making some phone calls, and unbelievably how this stuff got the right people. John Hannity, next thing you know, I was standing on a roof talking to Sean Hannity in the middle of the night with Grant, and this magical thing happened, and we were able to get him over here.
January 16th, 2005. Tell me about that. And then the subsequent days in which the family came under attack again.
Yeah, could I forget? They, we were coming down on a combat patrol again, like we always do around the MSR on the made hard tack, and we're traveling along at just a normal convoy speed, and I don't know all the logistics, but I just do know that from talking to the family later after the fact, that they had seen us and they were trying to come visit us and talk to us. Mr. Majid wanted to tell me something, and we heard shots, several of them, and Captain Wilz got on the radio and he said, is anybody taking hits? And everybody said, nope, they're not taking any hits. And it was just a hill. It was just over the top of the hill, about 300 to 500 meters away from the MSR. We could not see any of the action happening. And since we're so used to getting, not shot at, but we're so used to hearing rounds going off, they celebrate shooting in the air.
Those who are not familiar with anything going on during the war, you should know that any major city had bombs going off all the time, firefights all the time. You really could not take any one of them serious unless they were pointed at you, because you couldn't respond to all of them. Am I correct?
That is a fact statement. There was so much going on. I mean, you could just be driving by and somebody, just a gun goes off and there's somebody shooting something, a dog or an animal, or they mostly butchered sheep alongside the highway too, whatever means they did, and right alongside the end. And then there's a lot of celebrations there, and like you said, there was so much infantry fighting in the cities. There was just constant battles, small battles taking place everywhere.
October of 2004, that's when Samara finally fell. It was a wild, wild west up there, correct?
It was the most dangerous place on our route, for the most part. Beji eventually became a city we couldn't even go into, which was north of Samara and north of our base. But Samara, we had a good jaunt of road that we could actually, we kept very clean. By the time we cleaned it the next day, there was a bunch more garbage down there in the Samara area. It was butt tightening, puckering area. By the time you started to hit that Samara area, everybody was looking out the windows as hard as they could to see if we could spot any disturbance in the soil, a piece of debris that wasn't there yesterday. And then, you know, between the time I was there the next day, you'd see a lot more burn marks and blow up stuff, because right after we would pass, they'd put an IED out, they studied us, they watched us, they figured out, you know, stage guys up and down the highway with cell phones saying we just passed. And then they would put a bomb in, and sometimes we would turn around just to break things up and not do the same thing all the time. We'd find more bombs and save more soldiers.
It was like trying to keep up with the never-ending problem, right?
It is. It was, you're fighting humans, and
You saw on multiple occasions the actual result of these explosions and the people who paid their price. You were telling me a story the other night about two soldiers who got caught up in that, correct? And tell me about that story you were telling me the other night.
oh, we were coming down the MSR Tampa, and there's a oncoming logistics convoy that was coming back north, and they weren't paying attention, not taking that Samara area very seriously at all. The guy was driving, he probably was driving in the passenger side, or the regular lane, and there's a huge object sitting, a big old box sitting about 3-4 feet up on the side of the highway, and his passenger in his Humvee was putting a CD Discman Walkman, putting a disc in. They were watching, paying attention to nothing, and we're coming down the highway, and we see the explosion going off. By the time we got up to the explosion, The gunner had been blown completely out of the Humvee and was laying in the middle of the highway. There was a firefight ensuing. We drove our combat patrol down and surrounded. We made a circle with our vehicles and tried to get some security and get down a little bit lower rather than sitting up on top of the highway where we were high profile. And I got down in there, and there was two gentlemen that were sitting by a back tire, two soldiers, and they were huddled down with their hands over their heads. They didn't have their weapons. And so I asked them, I said, "Where's your weapons at?" And they said, "Well, we left them out there." And I go, they didn't want to go get their weapons because there's bullets flying everywhere. So I sprinted out, and I got both their weapons, brought it back to them, and told them to get up on perimeter and start providing security so we could deal with this Humvee that was hit.
You needed suppressive fire, correct?
We needed suppressive fire. There were so many rounds on the highway, it would look like a Christmas tree with the lights. That's how many rounds were out there already by the time this firefight was ensuing. We got down and we yanked the driver out of the Humvee, and we tried to give him CPR, and we're giving him chest compressions, and I opened up the side of his to get his plate out of the way, and he had a baseball-sized hole through his side. So we couldn't save him. He was dead instantly. At that point, I had turned and looked to see back into the Humvee. He was starting to smoke pretty good by now, and a fire had started to burn. So we grabbed that first soldier and drug him off to the side a little bit. I started to sprint around to the side of the Humvee and to get this was a black female that was in the passenger seat, and the blast had literally almost cut her head completely off, and it did. It actually fell off her body and rolled into the back seat. And when the fire started to burn, I couldn't get her out of there. And the rounds were cooking off. We ran back to get away from the Humvee. Now it was really starting to burn like an inferno thing, and we grabbed the soldier that we were trying to give CPR, and we picked him up to try to throw him back in the LMTV, and his whole body cavity was full of blood, and when we lifted him up to throw him in there, he just dumped all his blood and matter right over the top of my head and down my arm. And then by this time, the guys had shot so many rounds, the firefight had already quit. We were already starting to see some support coming in from the air, and the enemy disappeared. And then we started to recover everything that we could.
But you did what you could that day, and thank you for that. And all of this, and you get on the plane, and then you have to go back. And you saw some of this where they decided they were going to do their kind of a campaign in North Dakota to help her. That means fundraising. Because of her type of visa, she couldn't work, so they needed funds to survive, and they needed a certain threshold to meet in order to qualify. Well, once they got her over to the green zone, Fatima and the children, and they waited for April to be born, then it was a matter of getting her over there, logistics and getting everything set up for them. You saw the work he put into. How much of that work did you see, and did it take up a lot of time?
It took up a lot of time. So we would travel from Grand Forks, North Dakota, to Fargo, to Bismarck. Did we do a fundraiser in Jamestown?
Bismarck.
So Bismarck is probably... these fundraisers, they would be every weekend. I have a very large family in Grand Forks. Everybody would come out. Gown Construction, all the construction companies, Grand Forks, all this furniture, trucks from Ashley Furniture would come. We'd be selling brats out of this food truck, which food trucks weren't that famous back 20 years ago.
And Congressman Pomeroy was right with you doing all this, wasn't he?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so was the governor sometimes, wasn't he?
Governor Hoeven
Yeah.
was standing there holding
Oh,
up.
yeah.
He was right
I-
there with us.
Mhm.
The Senator Hoeven now.
People would come up out of the grocery stores. This is usually we're in grocery store parking lots. They would just be handing us cash like crazy. The kids were there every time. And if it wasn't the kids, it would be Fatima's brother, Ali, and his wife and kids. And it was just, we just had a great time.
But you were focused.
Fire trucks were there.
But you were focused, right? I mean, you were laser focused. This family was coming to you. There was no doubt about it.
Yep.
Then you got together a couple of jets from a donor, correct?
Yep.
And you and your husband flew out there to New York to meet her, and you had a limo so you could take the family around. Tell us about that.
Well, we flew in on a private airport. I can't remember what that's called, but we jumped in a limo, and I'm like, really? We're going to pick them up in a limo? This is great. So we drove across the bridge and got to JFK, and we waited there. And, okay, the family's coming in. So we all got ready, got our little cameras ready, and there's no cell phones really.
Yeah.
Nobody really had any cell phones that could take video. And the kids started coming in, and Fatima, she was just so excited. She must have recognized me from the pictures that Shayne had. There was a picture of me, like a couple of pictures of me in their house on the wall, which was really kind of crazy. But anyway, she just come to me and she says, in her Arabic, like, here, and then she handed me April. And April was this big. She had a pink little bonnet on. She was all wrapped up. I mean, just the cutest little tiny baby. And so we took the family into a room, and they got to use the bathroom. And the three of the boys, I asked Shayne, I go, do they know how to use toilet paper?
All that, yeah.
And Shayne's like, I'm not sure. They probably showed them in the green zone. I'm like, okay, because they're in the bathroom by themselves,
So maybe you need to go in there and figure that out for
Yeah.
them. What did they say to you when they got off the plane and met you? What did they say to you?
they were shy. They were hanging on to Fatima's arm. And Ali was there. So that was a big surprise for them. They hadn't seen Ali in probably years, I'm sure.
But they trusted Grant and
Yeah.
Shayne,
Yeah.
but probably nobody else, correct?
No, everybody else was strangers. There was a lot of people there. There was cameras there. There was a news crew there. And I can't figure out who else.
I don't remember.
Can't figure out how they knew about it.
I don't know. But we got them out in the limo. And I was holding April. She never made a peep. She was crying. She was like sleeping the whole time. The kids were just tiny, so we like fit everybody in there. It was just like the best moment. I didn't realize how much it was going to impact our lives at that point. I just knew they were coming here.
The family's their best
Of
friends
course,
now.
we did the fundraisers before and after they arrived. But after they arrived, they would come to the fundraisers, and then, of course, these people were like, well, here's the 20, 40, 60, 80. I mean, they wanted to help this family just as much as we did.
And the
The surrounding
141st
community.
became their second family up to their time that they ended the 141st. But that's a tradition that they take with them. Shayne, how much has it meant to you to help this family?
I literally, they were my family in Iraq. That's why I spent so much time going there. I just thought about them every day, and to get them back over here. And I was very fortunate to be as good of friends with Mr. Majid for the short period of time I got to be with him. Very privileged, I think. Well, I know. And then to get the family back here, and now they're my second family. I love each one of them. They're so smart. They
love you, I can see it too.
They do, and I'm so proud of them because they didn't come over here to settle back on society and have society taking care of them. They've taken and put the bootstraps on. They become doctors and lawyers. Ezra, with her eye, at one time was going to be an eye doctor, which I thought was ironic. But they're so smart. They're successful. They're out there doing what it does to make themselves better, surviving, making money, and I'm really proud of them. And now they have kids. Who would ever thought that we would see their kids someday?
For those who are watching this, one of the things that I really want to point out to all of you, we have this vision of a soldier, but we don't, and sometimes it's not always the best vision, but they are caring people too. And sometimes they'll put everything on the line to help a family. In this particular case, this isn't just about an Iraqi family. This is an American dream that came true for them under tragic circumstances. So I want people, when they see this, and by the way, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Shayne, for being here. But I want people to fully understand that they survived what most people would think was not survivable, and they did it, and they're succeeding. The American dream, and they're doing it. Thank you both. Shayne Beckert and Melissa Beckert, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
That's it for the Military Historian Podcast. I'm Lloyd Shellenberger, and I want to thank you. And this was episode 7. Thank you. That's it for the Military Historian Podcast. I'm Lloyd Shellenberger, your host. Tune in for more podcasts on the BNN Academy. Thank you.